Welcome to Head to Heart Podcast. I'm your host, Jenny Markham. This bi-weekly podcast is created to be a safe space to admit what we truly believe in our hearts. And many of us, when we take the time to truly examine ourselves, will find some sort of shame, fear, or lies hiding in there. And it is never God's will for us to stay in bondage to those. It's His truth that sets us free from them. But there's a huge difference between having biblical knowledge floating around in our heads and actually believing that it's true. Until God's truth makes its way into our hearts, nothing changes. We'll be doing a mix of solo episodes and interviews with friends who have experienced the freedom that comes when head knowledge becomes heart knowledge. We'll also have a time of prayer where you will have a chance to respond to what God is inviting you into at the end of each episode. The truth will set you free so you can walk every day in the freedom God desires for you. It's time to let go of shame, fear, and lies. Those aren't yours to carry. Thanks for joining us. Welcome back to Head to Heart Podcast. I'm your host, Jenny Markham. Today, I'm bringing a guest who is an author as well as many other hats. So I'm going to let her introduce herself. Shannan, would you just take time to say who you are, what you do, something about your family, a fun fact, whatever else you want to add?
Absolutely. I would love to. Thanks, Jenny. I am Shannan Martin. I live in Goshen, Indiana, so the very northernmost part of Indiana, up by the Michigan line. My family has lived in our neighborhood here for about 11 years. My husband is the chaplain of our county jail, and we have 3 teenagers still at home. I have to think about this every time. A 14-year-old, a 16-year-old, and a 17-year-old. And then our oldest is grown and lives nearby with his family. And I work as a cook at our neighborhood or community kitchen. So we serve a hot from scratch lunch 5 days a week. I work there 2 to 3 days a week. And then I also work as a writer and a speaker, but I really see a big part of my job and, something that I try to prioritize in my everyday life is really focusing on my identity as a neighbor. So I really see that as kind of my part of my vocation and really part of my spiritual DNA. I think of myself as a mom and a wife and all these things, but I also really think of myself as a neighbor. And I think if we could all start to kind of embody that and to really recognize that is, for Christ followers, that's part of our calling is to really look out into the world and try to identify how can we live as neighbors together. So that's what we're up to in Goshen. And as a fun fact, I stumbled upon one of my strangest claims to fame is my pickle recipe. I've become accidentally quasi famous for my pickles, which has very little to do with the rest of my work. I do love to cook. I love to be in the kitchen, but it's the easiest pickle recipe in the world. And even people who tell me they don't like pickles have turned out to really love these pickles. So I don't know. I don't have an explanation for that, but you just never know where life is going to take you, I guess.
That's awesome. Okay, so I know we'll be talking a lot about being a neighbor in this episode, and I already knew ahead of time. I was like, wow, this episode's going to have a real Mr. Rogers vibe to
Yes,
it.
I love it.
So, Shannan, what are you from?
I have been set free from the idea that living as a neighbor means doing something in particular. So when we moved into the neighborhood 10 or 11 years ago, we moved from a more rural context. We moved from a much more sort of homogenous context into this little overlooked, underloved, and underappreciated neighborhood on what a lot of people would see as the quote wrong side of the tracks. We, of course, very much see it as the right side of the tracks. But when we moved in, I brought with me this baggage or this idea that, I had to be helping people and doing all these things. And I had to almost have this agenda, but it couldn't really look like an agenda. It felt like this sort of stressful thing. And I almost felt like I had to kind of, go out into the city or into the streets and drum up business for God.
Mhm.
That's just how I kind of viewed this mission or this calling. And I've over time, this place and the people around me, God has used this place and these people to set me free from that striving, to try to be a certain thing or solve anyone's problems or save anyone from anything, but rather to look at living as a neighbor as an opportunity to pay attention, to be aware of what's going on around me, to be awake to God's goodness around me, even, in my physical neighborhood, in the sky and in the trees and in these streets, that if we can just learn to live from that posture of being awake and available, we will be ready when those opportunities for connection, when those opportunities come, we're ready for them. And that's all that is being asked of us, I think, is that we don't have to have this particular agenda. We don't have to set out to do a certain thing, but we can just be ready when opportunities come along. And that's really how I've sort of shifted in the way I live my life. And it's made a big difference. It's really changed everything for me.
Wow. I love that because I feel like the most challenging thing, I don't know if I'm speaking for other people. I might just be speaking for myself, but I'm sure someone else like me exists out there. I feel like the hardest thing is taking what the Bible says about hospitality, like be
Mhm.
hospitable to not just people you like and are friends with and are similar to, but literally everyone.
Yeah.
And then put that into practice because we just don't know where to start and
Right.
it gets overwhelming. So I love how your most recent book is called Start with Hello. I was like, oh, okay,
Yeah.
it's pretty basic.
Right. Right.
Yeah. Well, you moved from the country, correct?
That's right.
So can you tell us a little bit about some of the hardships about that move?
Oh, can I ever, Jenny? I mean, it was just even hearing that question, I'm like, where do I start? And it's not necessarily that it was this big dramatic thing, especially in hindsight. In hindsight, we kind of laugh like this felt like a really, really big deal. And in some ways it was. It was a big shift in terms of what we were familiar with, what we were comfortable with. Um, and so yes, it was dramatic in some ways, but now we're here. This is the place where we belong. This is the place where we hope we will be for a very long time. I've learned to not say forever because I've thought that before and I've been wrong. So,
Mhm.
I want to stay open and tenderhearted to those things, but we love it so much, and it's become our definition of home now. But that initial shift, for one thing, at the time we had a preschooler, a kindergartner, and a second grader. And now I've got all these teenagers who have really, this is all they really know. But at the time, it felt so monumental, this idea of moving these little babies from this very picturesque, idyllic sort of bubble that they were and we were in into the unknown. And so I think that element of the unknown and just, being thrust into the unfamiliar and maybe some degree of just discomfort, kind of out of our comfort zone, that felt like the biggest challenge. And really, what made that hard was a lot of the people around us really questioned that decision. And so that, I think, was the hardest part, was contending with this feeling that, we had this sense of being led to a new place, and it felt very exciting for us in most ways. We were
Mhm.
ready for it, we were excited, but being confronted with the doubts of other people
Mhm.
was kind of rattling. And I just remember thinking, oh, we are adults now. This is, we were like fully adults and had been for years and years and decades, but that was the point in time when I could realize, even if nobody else understands what we are doing or why, we can trust God's leading, and we can do it a little scared even. We can move forward even if everybody around us isn't necessarily cheering us on.
Mhm.
I think that was the biggest hurdle. And in most ways, those anxieties, I guess, have been quieted over time. It just took time, and the people who were worried for us, we knew their heart was in a really good place. And so over time, everybody kind of settled down and started to see like, okay, everybody's going to be fine. It's going to be good. But I think that can be a challenging thing for anybody when we have this idea or this sense of calling and we don't necessarily feel like it's being broadly supported. That's when we have to really kind of dig deep and trust the Spirit's leading.
Yeah. It's not a promise that the Holy Spirit gives us that, we will always be supported, but he does
Right.
promise to uphold us. And that's the promise.
Yeah,
I was
that's
just
it.
talking with a friend yesterday. She was like, sometimes I forget that I have free will.
Right.
We can
Right.
just do it anyway,
Yeah. Yeah. I think a lot of us were raised, and I know I'll just speak for myself. I was raised with this idea that there would be consensus maybe with these big decisions, that it would be, you know, kind of echoed in the people around us, or, if we were going to make a big change in life, it was going to be really outrageously supported, and that's how we would know, it would be kind of affirmed in the people around us. And sometimes that does happen, but I think I learned that it doesn't always happen that way, and we're all coming from different perspectives, and we've lived different experiences, and so we're kind of nervous or anxious for different reasons, but we can trust that the Holy Spirit guiding us, even if it's only us, we can trust in that, and we can hold on to that, and we can move forward in that. And that ends up being a different kind of testimony for the people around us who may have been kind of giving us the side eye.
Yeah. Yeah, that's very true. So, why is this idea of being a good neighbor so important? And I would love if you kind of talked about the cost of not being a good neighbor as well.
Yeah. I I that was the question that was paramount on our hearts and on our minds, when maybe before we moved into the neighborhood, but especially once we got here, was this question of, why does this matter so much to the heart of God? My husband and I had been both raised in Christian homes, very similar kind of evangelical backgrounds. And so, this wasn't news to us that God wants us to love God and love our neighbors, but it felt different when suddenly, we had gone from being surrounded by soybean fields to being surrounded by a really eclectic group of people in very close proximity to us. And it hit differently, that idea of, why does this matter? And so, that's the question that launched me into being an author and a writer. Those are the questions that I continue to write from. And I don't know that I'll ever have a final or definitive answer on it. But what I can say is, after many years of just leaning into and against these questions, I know that God created us to know one another and to need one another. And that's just the way we were built. That's the way we were wired. And so this isn't homework for us as
Mhm.
much as it's a gift to us. That God would continue to compel us out into the world that we're in, and into the complicated lives around us, and into living authentically and vulnerably and with open heart and open hands and an open door. It's for our benefit and for our blessing and our growth. So yeah, I think it's one of those questions that the more ways we can find to ask the question and begin to answer the question, the more we come to understand it.
Mhm. Yeah, that's really good. I love the idea of needing each other because I would say that if I don't have honey, like I needed to make kombucha the other day, and I was like, "Oh, let me go ask my friend upstairs in our
Yes.
apartment building." So that was so much better than me, first of all, going to the store and paying for honey. But
Right.
it's also so sweet to need each other. I actually like having a couple things that my neighbors don't own, so they come to me to borrow
Yes.
it just so I can see their face every now and then.
That's so good, Jenny. That's my all-time favorite tip. When people say, what's like your best tip? That's what it is. And you led into this perfectly. It's asking for help.
Mm.
And it's something most of us are not really necessarily comfortable with, but we are comfortable with people asking for our help. Like you said, like you like having those
Mhm.
things that you know people will come looking for. And what that tells us is, or it reminds us, we all love to save the day for someone. I mean, it's the
Mhm.
best feeling. Like
Yeah.
you said, like just the look on their face when you're able to be like, absolutely, take it. And so we've got to be willing to be on the other side of that. And we've got to be willing to let the people around us save the day for us.
Mhm.
And I think that's, for me, that's been the harder thing. And that's something that I've learned from my neighbors. Most everything I know about this, most everything I've learned from the people around me. They've been excellent and gracious teachers, but I have learned the value of asking for help. And I really am to the point now that I go looking for it. I go
Mhm.
looking for those opportunities to to ask, because I think in order to live truly, to live together as neighbors, we have to take turns. We have to take turns being needy, and we have to take turns, being the one that shows up and saves the day. We've got to be on both sides of that.
Mhm. I would say that's just a good rule for friendships in general as well.
Yeah.
And I understand the feeling of not wanting to be helpless or not wanting to ask for help because it feels vulnerable.
Right.
And I think what stops me sometimes from meeting new people, meeting new neighbors is this fear of the unknown or it being
Hmm.
so awkward. So,
Right.
how can we stop overthinking connecting with our neighbors?
Yeah. I wrote about this in Start with Hello. I wish I had the answer to how to not be awkward. That is not a book that I'm qualified to write. I need somebody else to tell me. I think there's an element to all of this. And I'm just an honest person. I want to just tell it like it is. And the reality is that feeling of awkwardness for most of us is just going to be part of it. I am an introverted person. I would typically, if it was left up to me, I would be sitting alone in my quiet house reading a book and
Mhm.
not dealing with these feelings of awkwardness and anxiety. That's just part of who I am, though, and I've learned that I have to actively work against that, and I've learned the tremendous benefits of doing that. That's something that it's like a muscle that as we exercise it, it does get easier over time. But we have to just accept that a little bit of awkwardness is going to be part of it, probably, and we have to be able to remind ourselves that we can survive a little bit of awkwardness,
Mhm.
because I think most of us feel like it's just us. Like most people tell me, and I say to other people, like, oh, I'm the most awkward person. We all kind of feel that way. And if we can just sort of lean into that and accept it as part of the deal here, that we're all feeling it on some level, but that's something that's pretty easy to overcome. That I don't know of a way to eliminate it. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like I don't know a great like tip to like how to never feel awkward again or how to never be awkward again. I think that's part of what it means to be human. And if we can get a little better at leading with that awkwardness or just accepting it and moving forward with it, when somebody comes to me and I can tell that they're feeling a little awkward, or maybe they kind of say the wrong thing, or maybe they show up and they need something and it's feeling really vulnerable, and I can tell that they're feeling vulnerable. All I ever feel from my perspective is really honored that they trust me. I'm feeling like, okay, they're not perfect either. So maybe I don't have to try to be perfect. It's a really disarming way to move forward into connection with each other, and it just kind of lets all of us exhale a little bit and just like, okay, we're going to fumble through this a little bit, which is super relatable, and we're going to come through on the other side of this a little closer to each other.
Mhm. Yeah, that's such a good truth to cling on to is that if it is awkward, I will survive.
That's it. That's it.
Yeah.
And the person on the other side of that is not judging us. I mean,
Mhm.
we have to, it's so helpful for me to put myself on the other side of the equation just to imagine, like when you went to ask for honey and it might have felt a little, let's just say it felt awkward for you, like, oh, I don't know. What if I'm bothering them? What if blah blah blah? We do all these what ifs.
Mhm.
But if somebody came to your door asking for honey, you would never be feeling like, well, that was a waste of my time, or what are they doing here? Or, like
Yeah.
we
Right.
just feel so much affection and grace and gratitude on
Right.
behalf of that other person. So if we can get better at reminding ourselves that's how probably most people are going to approach us too, it makes it a little easier.
Right. That is so good. And I wouldn't even think twice about it.
Exactly. You would be thrilled to be able to save the day. That's
Hmm.
just the truth of it.
Yeah.
And even if you couldn't, even if you didn't have honey, you would probably be feeling like, or saying, I mean, one thing that I say to my neighbors often, because I can't always help. Like when people come to me looking for help, when I can, I love to. But we realistically can't always do the thing, whatever the thing is, or help with the thing. And I've learned to say, I cannot help this time. Like if somebody, one of the things that I get asked regularly, because a lot of the people in my neighborhood don't drive for different reasons. So I'm asked to give rides, and it's something that I can pretty easily offer, but not always.
Hmm.
So I've learned to say, I can't do it this time, but ask me every time. And I will always say yes when I can. And I'll always be honest and tell you when I can't. And that has been such a great way to build trust between me and the people around me, because it's just the truth of the thing. It's
Hmm.
like there's no sense of, is she doing this because she feels obligated, or, is she secretly annoyed because it was an interruption in her day? I mean, to just decide and to let people know, like, I'm gonna say yes when I can, I'm gonna say no when I can't. It's
Right.
been good.
Yeah. That's awesome. Well, I'm going to ask you a question that's going in a specific direction, and that I know that we have a lot of listeners who are post grad, whether they're not in college anymore or they graduated. They might be adjusting from dorm life to a new form of neighboring, or
Yeah.
in an apartment, or new roommates, or however their situation is. It can be such a strange transition. So, how would you encourage them, first of all? And then also, could you just help them, give them some tips to prevent becoming isolated in that season?
Yeah. One of the most profoundly helpful practices I sort of stumbled into when I moved into the neighborhood, because I wasn't, I was in a different phase of life, but this place was brand new to me. I knew nobody in the city. I had little kids at home. I mean, I wasn't working at the time. I was just, at my house with my kids trying to learn this new place. And there was a lot of opportunities for that to become pretty isolating. But one of the things that became helpful for me, and I think this works for anybody, is to find ways to be visible in your
Mhm.
place, wherever that is, to just be out. For me, and for I think probably a lot of people, it means taking walks in your neighborhood,
Mhm.
and being, I started. All right, I'm sorry. I titled my book "Start with Hello" because every relationship that we have began in a very small way. Even our the closest people in our lives, they all started with that simple kind of close to the ground beginning of a eye contact or a simple hello or a wave, and then when we're lucky, some of those relationships really grow and build from there. So I say, take walks when you're able to in your neighborhood or in your place. It doesn't even have to be with a real agenda, but as I did that, and as I did it more consistently, I started to just kind of learn my place. It became more familiar. Then people started to become more familiar. And then, you notice this person is going to be sitting on their porch at this certain time. And over time, you might say hello. We can let this be very slow work
Mhm.
and trust that every little tiny interaction that seems very insignificant, it actually does count for something, and it matters, and it goes from there. So just for me, it's like recentering to a place of just attentiveness and paying attention to what's around you and noticing. But to take it one step further, I would say joining in to something that's already happening. I mean, if
Mhm.
you have a hobby, for me in the beginning, it was joining PTO because I had kids in school. It was joining a neighborhood association, just finding something that was already happening and joining in. It's just a normal person, not necessarily for the intention of finding meaningful friendship, but I think even just kind of loose connections and coming to a place where we have more acquaintances, that's a meaningful step too. It's
Mhm.
not to be discounted. So yeah, just finding places to be around people is a really good place to start.
Yeah, I really like that because with our very close friendships, sometimes we forget that we were not always close to them. And at
Yes.
some point, we felt uncomfortable or we didn't know them at all. And
Yeah.
over time, just interactions built up and then we
Yeah.
became friends.
Yep. They all start with that simple little gesture. And so if we can make that more of a rhythm and just get a little more intentional about it, I love my phone and I love social media, and part of my work has me in those places, but it is worth saying, sometimes like to be looking up and looking out and just being a little more intentional. I think it's about just these little tiny shifts that we can make in our regular full lives that we're already living. It's not about taking on some new project or just changing our lives from the ground up. It's like I'm just going to take a walk whenever
Mhm.
possible. I'm going to take a walk. I'm going to put my phone away and just kind of let my mind wander and let my eyes notice what they notice and trust that it counts. Trust that it's working towards the goal of connection.
Mhm. I love that. So, could you give our listeners just a little challenge of some sorts that they can practically implement this idea into becoming a better neighbor this week?
This is going to kind of piggyback on what I just shared about taking walks. One of the things that has become really fun and meaningful for me over time is to choose one place, one little spot or location within the area that you live. So, I live in this little neighborhood, but we all live in different contexts. So, wherever your place happens to be, find one little location and take a picture of that place once a month. And so this is a long game that we're playing here. This is a long haul practice. What it has done for me is, it's personal to me. It's something that's very meaningful for me. I do share it on Instagram because it's been fun for other people to kind of jump in and start to do their own similar little practice. But it's just given me this really cool time stamped glimpse at my neighborhood. And it helps me to just pay attention to things that change and things that stay the same. And there is something about just that intention of noticing, like literally noticing with my eyeballs what's happening around me that has made me live as a more in tune person to my neighbors and to the people around me. I don't quite know what the magic is, but there's real magic in just noticing the life and the goodness of God happening around us. So you take that picture once a month and you save it somewhere where you can access it, and then over time you go back and you look at like the seasons are changing and the landscape is changing, and it's kind of this artsy, and I'm not a super artsy person, but it makes me feel artsy when I do this, and just noticing like, wow, this is really cool, and it gives me the sense of, this is where I belong, and I'm here for as long as I'm able to be. It's just kind of a really grounding thing to do.
Hmm. That's really cool because at the beginning you said, you thought that being a good neighbor meant doing a specific thing, starting some sort of project or,
Mhm.
doing something, starting something up. But I like how even this little practice is just a practice to, like you said, just be and be
Yeah.
available for your neighbors when you need them and when they need you.
Yep, that's it.
So, Shannon, where would people be able to find you and your books?
You can find me almost every day on Instagram. I'm at Shannan Writes there, and on Twitter. And then you can also find some of the other stuff I'm kind of doing or have going on my website, shannonmartin.com. There's information there. You can find my books wherever books are sold, but you can also find it on the website. Most importantly, you can find that pickle recipe on my website. It's all there. There's a couple other, fun things that you can find and download on the website. But yeah, Instagram and the website. My email newsletter is probably my most special place to spend my time and to share on a more personal level. And you can find links to all of that on the website.
Okay. I love how you flipped the narrative and you said out loud, I love social media. Instead of, it needs to reduce. We have to take our break. I just, it's so distracting. And I love
know
how you said that.
Yes, good. I'm glad. It's a both and. I mean, we've got to just be realistic about it. It brings a lot of joy and a lot of beauty and a lot of good information. I've learned a ton. That's something that's another little thing that we can all do, is just kind of rethink, who are we listening to? Who are we learning from?
Mm-hmm.
And there are so many wise, intelligent people sharing their knowledge for free on Instagram and Twitter. So yeah, kind of switching up who I'm following in those spaces has been a big game changer for me too. So yes, I'm pro social media with limits.
Of course. Yes. Well, Shan, thank you so much for being the guest. It's been so much fun talking to you, and I hope that this is so helpful for every listener who this podcast falls upon.
Yes. Thank you, Jenny. I loved it.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Head to Heart Podcast. It's a joy to record them and a joy to have you listen. Since you're a dedicated listener and made it to the very end of the episode, I have 2 gifts for you. One is that I have a free resource linked in the show notes for you. It's a resource created to help you take the truth you've learned either in this episode or in a previous one and apply it to your life. The second gift I have for you is access to my seasonal playlists. Every season, summer, fall, winter, spring, I create a regular playlist and a worship playlist that will be ongoing throughout the season. And you'll be able to follow it on Spotify if you need some good boogie tunes. Because let's be honest, in another life, I would have been a DJ. So you now have full access to meet all your seasonal music needs in the show notes. As always, I love hearing from you. So follow me on Instagram and send me a DM of how this episode impacted you. The handle is headtoheart_podcast. And if you would be so kind, leave a 5-star rating and review on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or the website. By doing this, you'll help me get more amazing guests on the show in the future. I'll be releasing new episodes to you every other Friday, so stay tuned and thanks for joining us.